All right, and we are live. Welcome to another episode of What Lies Beyond the podcast. I'm your host, Mark Brenner, and I'm here with my co hosts, Michael and Greg. Welcome,
How's it going,
guys.
guys?
Thanks for being with me.
Thanks for having me along again.
Yeah, thank you too, Greg. And today we got a special guest. We're going to jump right into it, and then afterwards we're going to have some
Good.
news. We're going to talk about Miami, and we're gonna talk about that and some maybe a couple other things. But looking forward to that after our interview. But without further ado, I want to give a brief introduction to our guest, who Ron Felber. He is an amazing author. He very distinguished author, and he wrote a book called The Mojave Incident, and it is one of the most terrifying, absolutely amazing books of paranormal phenomenon ever written. And it involves UFOs, non-human beings, parapsychological phenomenon like poltergeist activity, and all kinds of stuff. And without further ado, I want to bring my friend Ron on stage. Ron, you're a busy man, and thank you very much for taking your time to be with us again, and welcome to What Lies Beyond.
Mark, it's always a pleasure. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. Ron, I'll let you get. Let's go back to for our listeners who didn't, our new listeners on the show. We have a lot of new people who are listening, watching the show from our old show, Project Stargate. Could you tell us a little bit about your background for them, and then we'll go from there.
Sure, I'm sure I'd be delighted. Well, let's see. I started writing, really a long time ago when I was in grammar school. As a matter of fact, I was writing short stories back then, and my brother, who was in high school at the time, would get them published in the high school magazine. So I later became editor of that magazine, and I've been writing really ever since. I did work in law enforcement for about 3 years. I was a federal marshal that transported prisoners. And that really helped with my writing, because these guys were characters, hitmen, they were terrorists, they were serial killers. So that at the end, you got an insight into personalities you never, ever know on the street.
Right.
And of course, I wasn't terribly happy about doing that for a living at the time, because I just graduated from Georgetown University. I was about $43,000 in debt. And, I needed a job desperately to pay my loans down. And so I did that for 3 years and wrote for True Detective magazine. So I figured,
really?
well, I'm transporting these guys. I might as well get some stories out of it. And so I started writing for them. Then I wrote the Nick Carter series, which was a sort of the American James Bond. A lot of guys in the services would buy the Nick Carter books. And when I was at Georgetown, and this is where The Unwelcome, this new book, comes from, William Peter Blatty, was filming The Exorcist. So this was back in '73. I was a student. I had a new book that I had written, my first novel. It was loaded with typos. So here's this guy's got a bestseller on the New York Times bestseller list for 56 weeks or something. Said, what a great opportunity. He's here, within grasp. And I got him to read, not easily, but I handed it off to a secretary, who handed it off to an admin, who handed it off to him. And he actually read my first novel. So I was on Thanksgiving break, and at home with my parents, I get a phone call, and it's from Bill Blatty. It says, I liked your book. Come over to the Key Bridge Marriott, and we'll talk about it. So of course, this made my holiday, that's for sure.
Sure.
I went back. We became good friends, and he said, "Look, I can't help you with this book because it's your first novel, and it's not quite there. But I'll tell you what, I'll have my secretary give you my address. And if I move," and he was moving a lot, he had more than one house. "If I move or where I am, she'll let you know. so that you can forward your next novel. And I promise I'll help you with it, help you get it published. And he was true to his word. He did help me get it published. It was a small publisher in New York, and it was called The Indian Point Conspiracy. But the best thing about that relationship at that stage of the game was he said, I'm working on a new book, and I have an idea for another one that I'm not going to do. He goes, just because I want to do something other than demonic possession and paranormal. I want to do something about my mother and a sort of memoir. I said, great. He said, at the Harvard Medical School library are notes, documentation, photographs, letters, transcripts of psychiatric sessions of a Radcliffe student, a young Radcliffe student, and her name was Clara Fowler. And she displayed all the symptoms of demonic possession. And she was studied by Dr. Morton Prince, who was one of the founders of American psychiatry, William James, the great William James, who was the first person to teach abnormal psychology at Harvard University, a clairvoyant named Leonora Piper, who was the clairvoyant at the time, spiritualist, and a fellow named Richard Hodgson, who was president of the American Psychical Research Institute.
So
they
you had
studied this
some
woman for 5 years, and this was put in my lap, and this was the basis for The Unwelcome, the Curious Case of Clara Fowler.
So they had some parapsychologists, some early parapsychologists, I would say. This is like before Dr. Ryan, the founder of the Ryan Institute.
Mm-hmm. This would have been 1898 is when the studies first
1898.
started.
Okay.
In Boston, at the turn of the century, and it all took place in Back Bay, Boston, on Beacon Street, where he had his practice, along with a fellow named George Waterman. So it was a team of really great experts. It was George Waterman, the heir to the Waterman Penn dynasty. There was William James. There was Morton Prince. Even Sigmund Freud got involved via letters, which are part of the book as well.
That is really interesting. From what I know about the book, what you've kind of shared with me in confidence, I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but
I'm delighted to talk about it.
There's some linkage to two serial killers, H.H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper. What in the world? Tell me about that.
Yeah. The more you look at things, the paranormal and parapsychology and things of that nature, the more you see connections and links between things that don't necessarily seem linked. But what links H.H. Holmes, who is a part of the book, you're correct, and Jack the Ripper, who is part of the book, and actually wrote a letter. There's a letter written by Jack Ripper to one of the marshals, the detectives that was involved in the Clara Fowler story. What links them is the nature of evil and demonic possession. And one of the things that I start, the back of the book, is evil real? Is it a metaphor for the bad things people do? Or does it prowl the earth like a living, breathing entity that possesses the souls of vulnerable humans? And of course, I think it's the latter. I think evil is very real. And if there's anything I learned transporting guys that had killed 70 people, serial rapists, terrorists, it's that evil is very much real. It exists. It isn't some... It can't be explained away by psychiatric terms. It's evil is evil.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I I think there's a clear difference between someone who's like schizophrenic and does something that they don't even know they're doing
Yes.
that may be bad to somebody, horrible to someone else, and someone just consciously making a decision. Oh, I'm going to go do this horrible thing to such and such, and I definitely agree with that. Demonic. I was talking to someone. We had a guest recently. Not as our last guest is actually the Ralph Sarchi, and he worked with the Warrens and all this other stuff, and Father Malachi Martin, and it was a great interview. We just had some really weird anomalies happening during the podcast, but
Mm-hmm.
he started out as an NYPD police officer, and then he started doing what he calls the work. They made a movie out of it and everything called Deliver from Evil. He wrote a book.
Oh, sure. I know that movie.
Yeah, we had him on the last podcast, and I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. What else can you tell us about this story? Is there any other details you can disclose about this
Of course,
story?
yeah, absolutely. You know, it's this is one of the case histories The Exorcist was based on, but I think there are things about it that Bill Blatty didn't even know, which I hired a detective to help sort things out, some of the backgrounds and whatnot. But what happened was Clara Fowler, who displayed these symptoms of demonic possession, by that I mean talking in different voices, foretelling the future, reacting violently to religious items, just all the classic symptoms that you would imagine, including levitation, etc. But
Wow.
but these guys studied her in great depth. So I have the letters that went between them, the psychiatric transcripts of her under hypnosis. And what happened was there's sort of a battle between the spiritualists. This would be a guy named Hodgson and Leonora Piper, the clairvoyant, and William James and Dr. Morton Prince. One is seeing it from a psychiatric standpoint. And it's very key at that moment in time that psychiatry be legitimatized, that this is a real science. On the other hand, you have two members of this team that are spiritualists and say that she is possessed by a devil. She shows the symptoms, every single thing seems to line up that way. So there's a battle that goes on between them as to what's going on. And so they treat her this way. They actually do have an exorcism from the spiritualist standpoint, because they're getting rid of a devil and casting it out of her body, a foreign personage in her body. To the psychiatrist, it's for shock value. If she truly believes she's possessed by a demon, an exorcism will relieve her of that delusion. So there's that sort of battle that goes on there. But beneath it all, and one of the things that created Clara Fowler, who, by the way, in one personality sees the Virgin Mary and Jesus Christ and talks to these religious personages like you and I are talking. And on the other hand, in the second personality, becomes this vicious, vile entity that just is evil incarnate. As they trace things back, and this is where Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes and all of this, there were two murders. Her siblings were murdered. At first, they thought that it was convulsions. They were only 4 days old. Separated by 4 years, her one sibling, that would be Charles, died at 4 days old. The doctor came, saw it, said, well, it's convulsions, whatever. Next, 4 years later, at 4 days old, her sister dies, Betsy. So she dies. There's a marshal, and this is one of the great characters that just, like I said, is handed to you by destiny. But this one character, and this would be Rufus Hilliard. They call him Bassett because he's a detective and he's like a Basset hound. So his nickname is Bassett. So Bassett is like a Wyatt Earp kind of guy. And he, after talking to the coroner, determines these babies didn't die of natural causes; they were strangled to death.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
Right.
Wow.
So, this is shocking as these psychiatrists and spiritualists uncover this, begin to uncover it. But one of the key characters is Bassett, who wants Clara to testify against her father, who is an alcoholic and a wife beater, to testify that he committed murder. So he's got the coroner, but that's circumstantial. But if he can get Clara to testify against her father because she was there, this would allow him to develop a case. This was also the guy, and this is just true. He was the guy that investigated the Lizzie Borden murders.
Really?
Mm.
We got another connection here. Here's another connection.
Yeah,
Lizzie
exactly.
Borden. Wow.
So basically, you've got a lot of tension going on in the story, but what connects them is that there was a satanic cult in Fall River, which has a very strange history going back to the 1600s and probably before that. But as it turns out, before this is all over, they realize that there are 3 murders, and the father is the major suspect, who was a member of this cult.
Oh, there's the point of contact right there.
There's the point of contact. So from the spiritualist standpoint, your point of contact, these people invited the devil into their lives. And Clara was part of that. She was part of that as a child, as a young child. So from the psychiatrist standpoint, well, of course she thinks she's possessed by a devil because she was surrounded by this at a young age and these horrible things, deaths and murders and things. And so that's what happened. This is fertile ground for a psychiatric situation,
right?
Catastrophe. From the spiritual standpoint, it's just the opposite. Yeah, this is the point of contact, though, right? You invited a demonic presence into this world, into this cult, who had black masses. She participated, and she's possessed by the devil.
Wow, that's hardcore, man. That to me, I that story blows. Nothing against Mr. Blatty, God rest his soul, but that blows his novel out of the water as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I think it does because it's true. Most of what I have, and look, when you write a book, you could write a really boring book, and it could be a medical textbook, and it could have these letters, and it could have so. I don't write books like that. I try to make them more interesting. I'm not writing a medical book. I'm writing a story. Like I'm telling a story. It's a true story, but nevertheless, I'm telling it. And so it's true that some of the scenes are dramatized.
Right.
There's dialogue I had to invent between, let's say, the detective and the doctor. I mean, I wasn't there, so I can't tell you what they said. So I had to invent those kind of things. But other than that, as far as the case itself, almost all of the dialogue between the doctor and Clara Fowler comes right from transcripts.
Wow.
Almost all of it in terms of the case itself, where I had to dramatize because it was dramatic enough. I didn't have to do anything with that. But with other things where you're talking about sort of a murder mystery that overrides all of this, in those situations, I had to again invent some dialogue between certain characters, but it enhanced the drama, but it didn't distort the true story.
Wow. I want to open this up for commentary for my co-hosts. Would you, Michael? You want to kick it off?
Yeah. I mean, like I haven't been able to read what he's given to you. Of course, he gave it to you in confidence, so I'm not even going to ask about that. But I actually just finished Mojave Incident today, and I've got it right here. And I finished it today, and I do appreciate the fact that I understand that there are things that you do have to kind of embellish with, dialogue and things like that to kind of keep the narrative
Exactly.
seated.
Exactly.
And it's one of those things where you, even though, yeah, you're telling this story, but at the same time, having that narrative kind of puts you in the seat of being that viewer, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's one of those things like the whole thing of them being in the camper, you know, viewing the entities outside the vehicle and how they're basically just coming down on them in droves and everything else. Man, that it sent chills up my spine, man.
Yeah.
And
It did me too.
yeah,
And you know, I have to
Yeah.
tell you, Michael, if you saw these two individuals under hypnosis retrogress back to those moments,
Mhm.
I mean, these were people that were, it was sheer terror,
Mhm.
sobbing, screaming. I mean, this is under hypnosis to the point where the psychiatrist had to say, you know, we're backing off this. It's too.
Yeah, let's dial it back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was gonna ask too. Like, do you still have like any contact with the Giffords, or have you?
I don't. I
heard from
did
them, or-
after it was quite a while ago that story was actually written, and for a
Mhm.
number of years we kept in touch and did some talk shows and things like that. But then they really never wanted to tell this story.
Right.
You know, they never really wanted to. You got to understand, and it's hard to. But you know, when astronauts come back, like when these guys came back from the moon,
Mhm.
they came back and they suffered depression. You know, they suffered real depression because basically, I guess they say to themselves, "What do I do now? I just went to the moon. I'm the first,
Mhm.
man on the moon.
Yeah.
How do I follow this act? What's important after this?" And I think also you see a glimpse of a universe that's so large it dwarfs your ego.
Mhm.
And I think with them, it was a lot like that. It was like a
Yeah.
curtain was removed, and they saw a reality, or maybe the reality,
Mhm.
or another dimension. Whatever, however you want to look at this story, and he couldn't work. You know, how do you go to work? You know, how do you have a cup of coffee and say, "Oh, let's go, guys. We're going to go on a work crew and and build a shopping mall."
Yeah.
How do you teach third graders when So
How
they
do you
had
deal with a world that you've seen what's behind the
it
curtain of the curtain?
it blows
You know?
your mind. I mean,
Mhm.
really, it blows your mind. So that day-to-day situations just don't seem to matter. It's
Mhm.
like I saw God. What's next? I mean, this doesn't mean anything. My job, this money, this house, this is all it's dwarfed by what I've seen. And so that's where they were. I mean, that's the mindset that they came into this. My point being, they didn't want to talk about it, and then when they did it only, I mean, I think twice maybe. They
Mhm.
they did
They were
two
on
interviews.
Paranormal Witness. They were
Yeah.
on one segment of that show.
Yes, that and one interview, and so we kept in touch, but it isn't something they wanted to dwell on, and they became pretty religious. They moved to Utah. They were Mormons, and at least the wife was, and then the
Mhm.
husband I think converted, but one way or the other they wound up in Utah and became very very involved with the Mormon Church, and so the bishop there said, "You didn't have a UFO alien abduction experience. You had a demonic presence experience."
Hmm.
This was a religious situation. This was a
Yeah.
theological moment, not a an alien abduction. These were demons.
Yeah.
Puts
I
a
want to
whole
get
different
in.
light on it.
I really want to get into the Mojave incident again, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind
At
at
some
all.
point, I think we lost Greg here. I'm wait. As soon as he comes back, I'm going to put him back on stage. Um, but anyway, I didn't want to mean to interrupt you guys. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Well, and at the same time, as you mentioned with, say, the guys on the moon again,
Yes,
the whole comparison of like, I've been on the moon. What else is going to come?
exactly.
But then you also have all this other controversy of things that supposedly happened while they were up there that was picked up on, off-channel radio
Yes,
and
yeah,
things like
I've
that.
seen those reports.
Yeah, and how when after 6 months of being debriefed, so to speak, they go on TV and they're like, "Yeah, you've been on the moon, man," and they're just like, they look like they've been kicked in the teeth.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely. Yeah.
I
You
mean,
know, I heard a story about that, guys. You know how they routed the communications to Australia and then they
yeah,
forwarded it to us.
mhm.
Well, they had to switch at some point. They had to switch to another channel. It's that they went dark on all the official channels for like a certain amount of time. I don't remember how much time it
It
was.
was 14 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
okay.
remember seeing that as
Thank
well.
you.
Yeah.
And when that happened, it seemed like they report there's a lot of rumors. That could be just be rumors, but that they saw something out there watching them,
Mhm.
which is chilling.
Yeah,
You know,
sure.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and
there were craft and entities standing on the edge of the crater that they were in.
yeah,
And like when Armstrong made the remark about hearing music up there and stuff like that, but they can't talk about it, and I mean they don't really want to talk about it again
Hmm.
because their careers and everything is at stake and things like that. But again, like I was going to say too, is that a lot of people when they have these incidents occur to them, they don't want to talk about it because of the stigma attached to it. Because
Absolutely.
automatically you're
Absolutely.
you're a wacko.
Absolutely. You want to hear the interesting, one of the really interesting and fascinating things? There are two things I wanted to point out. One is the demonic entity actually would write letters
really,
to
Mm,
Clara Fowler. So here's one, and this is a real note. So she would torment her. She would keep her awake at night. So she had terrible insomnia. When she went to eat, she'd see maggots and whatnot in her food, so she'd
mhm.
never want to eat. So basically, she was sleep deprived and
Being starved
being
and
starved, and had these vicious nightmares. But just to show you a really fascinating thing, I think. So she comes home to her apartment after classes one day, and she had been ill. The landlady there knew she had been ill. So she sees a package and it's wrapped with a ribbon and whatnot. And she says, "Oh, maybe this is a get well present from the landlady
mhm.
or one of the other tenants who knew that she was ill. Didn't know what was wrong with her, but knew that she was ill." She opens it up and it's filled with spiders and a dead rat.
that sounds very much like in Elise
Wow.
Michelle's case.
So this is the letter that
If
she
I said that
finds.
right.
She finds this letter. "You little wretch. I suppose you've killed all my spiders and tossed out my rat. I hope they've bitten you all over. It's good for you to know. You must always remember that. Dear Clara, soul of honor indeed, how the mighty have fallen. There are more spiders and snakes too that will amuse you in bed at night. But I know you're not the least bit grateful, but you will be before we've finished our course together. With much love and caring."
Wow.
Wow.
Here's another one.
Dang.
Try this one on, Prasad.
Okay. Okay.
"Hypocrite, whore, how I hate you. The pains of hell shall come down upon you. You shall find no help, no comfort in heaven or on earth from my wrath, not till student Clara is dead and puts a bullet through her head. How long will that be, do you think? Days, weeks? No, no longer, surely. You shall sacrifice yourself at the earliest opportunity. Then you shall be gone, and I shall be forever. Devil, devil, devil."
Gosh, was this like automatic
Wow.
writing or something like
No,
that?
this was she would wake up. She'd go in, she'd have missing time. So
No
during
way.
these periods of missing time, this second personality would take over and do all kinds of things. One of the major things that she did, aside from keeping her awake at night, aside from tormenting her with the nightmares of rape and being torn apart by animals, and not be and starving her, she would take her on marathon walks. So she'd wake up and find herself 5 miles from where she was, where her home was, without shoes, her dress torn. And at the end, the demon realized that it had more control over the body. It could take over the body more easily when she was fatigued, when she was run down. And it truly believed that when she died, it would take over the body permanently by itself and not have any competition for that body.
Hmm.
Wow. I wonder if that's ever really happened. I wonder if it's possible in the first place. Like if someone like if her soul completely left her body in death. I don't really think it could, because then your organ is completely shut down, and that shell is pretty much useless at that point.
Yeah, I think the key for this would be to sort of slip in at a very particular moment.
Hmm.
Yeah, just before the body would shut down.
Yeah,
That's
I
kind of
guess
like
that would be key.
kind of a weird parallel for that. This in Hollywood as well. There was a movie with Denzel Washington. It was called Fallen, and the movie started with the lines of, "Let me tell you about the time I almost died." But the voice of the narrator is Denzel Washington
I see.
through the whole story.
Right.
But you come to find out that the story was being told, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen this film, that it was the demon that was jumping bodies and committing murders in other people's bodies by
Yeah.
touch.
Uh-huh.
And
I
at the
remember
very
that.
end of the movie, he's laying there in Denzel's body, getting ready to die. And as soon as his heart stops, and the demon is, of course, screaming for breath and everything else, a random raccoon or a possum wanders up, and you know,
Oh man, I remember that
yeah,
movie.
yeah,
Greg, did you
great
have any
movie. But
did
go
you
ahead.
have any comments or questions, Greg?
No, but all I could say though is that my connection is awful. I'm sorry. My feed's been jumping in and out. I have metal plates on the roof of my apartment building, so I think that's what's been messing with my connection each
That's all
time I
right,
do
buddy.
this.
That's all right.
So
The
I'm sorry,
No
That's all right.
worries.
That's all right.
but
Also, I want to remind our listeners, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat on Facebook or YouTube. Type them in all caps. If you have a comment or a question for our guest, feel free to do so. Ron, when I'll let you after we get done talking about this. I know you have a personal revelation that you made to me.
Yeah.
If you're willing to talk about that, we'd love to hear about it, and then maybe we can get into the Mojave incident for the last hour or so.
Sure. Sure. Actually, so this is how things sort of built to where I am today. Many years ago, meaning 30 years ago or so. Well, it must have been 35 because my son wasn't born. So it was maybe 35 years ago. I lived near the beach in New Jersey, and I had a dog, and it was a Norwegian Elkhound, and I would walk it early in the morning, and often I had to go to the airport, which was quite a ride. So I would walk the dog at 4 in the morning, because I'd walk the dog, I'd have some breakfast, I'd head to the airport. It was quite a drive, etc. So anyway, I had this dream, and in the dream, I was walking the dog, and it was sort of winter, and the way the house was situated, the ocean was not far away, maybe 3 blocks, and then another block, 2 blocks in from my house, the other direction, was a pond. It was a large pond, with an American flag and a little park. And so in the dream, I was walking the dog, and we stopped at the pond, and I looked in the pond, and there was this disc-shaped object. The pond was about 30 feet deep, and it was quite large. And I noted that my watch had stopped. So I had looked at my watch, I guess maybe because I had to catch a flight or whatever, and the watch had stopped. And I had this compulsion in the dream to dive into the water and see this object, which was a UFO. So I jumped in the water in my dream, and I came out, and I was inside the UFO. I was inside the craft, and actually things were very cordial. It was a sort of a being that took me around, showed me maps, showed me where they came from, a little bit about the technology, which was over my head and not something I talked a lot about, but I listened, and it was an incredibly euphoric dream. I felt really good, about this encounter. So the next thing I know, I'm standing with my dog again at the edge of the pond, and the UFO is gone. And I'm sort of fascinated that the watch has started again, and my clothes are dry. I'm saying, wow, I should be freezing right now, but I'm not. And that was the dream. So I just put that aside, although it was incredibly vivid. And for maybe 3 weeks or so, I just felt great. I had this really peaceful, beautiful feeling. So many years after that, and by that I mean, again, maybe 35 years later, I had a salesman that worked for me on the West Coast. I was on the East Coast, and we became friends. And he introduced me to the Giffords because he had played football with the guy. He was an all-league football player, and they played football together, so they were best friends. So he had confided in my friend what happened to him with the alien abduction, and my friend Paul was his name, was concerned about him. He didn't want to. He again, sexual dysfunction, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, didn't want to work anymore. His wife, the same thing, and he's just concerned. He said, I know you're a writer, and I think maybe we're friends. I know you wouldn't exploit them in any way, but maybe you want to meet them because it might be a great story and it might be helpful to them to tell the story. So I said no. I just didn't have any interest in it. I was writing like the Nick Carter series. I was writing spy novels and stuff, and I didn't really want to go down that road because, frankly, I thought, well, maybe these people are just having psychological problems. Anyway, he convinced me to meet them, and I did, and they were like the backbone of America kind of people, 2 kids. He was a project manager for construction for shopping malls, the least prone to fantasy of anybody you'd know, real meat and potatoes kind of guy, football guy. His wife was, somewhat religious, but really a mother. Both college graduates, etc. So anyway, that's how the Mojave Incident happened, which was just sheer circumstance, sheer coincidence, And then I had a couple knee injuries. The last one from a jujitsu thing with my son. We're doing jujitsu, and I hurt my knee quite badly, and I had a previous meniscus surgery. So I went to the doctor, had the surgery done. After the surgery, he takes an x-ray out and he goes, something strange happened. Inside your knee is a piece of metal. And on the x-ray, which was black, it shone like silver. And it was sort of like an arrowhead, but much smaller, maybe the size of the pinky, your nail on your pinky. And that piece of metal was in. He said, I tried to get it out, and I fished around for it, but I couldn't get it out. So it's still there. So I just wanted you to know that. I think probably a surgical tool maybe broke, maybe the tip of a surgical tool, which sounds kind of odd. He said, or somebody left something in your knee from the surgery. I guess that happens sometimes. But I didn't think too much of that either. Mm-hmm. So then actually only a couple of months ago, I'm watching a show, and it's about alien abduction, which I've now had a great interest in. And they're interviewing a fellow who had a piece of metal in his knee that he said was inserted during the alien abduction. And so what they did was they showed the X-ray, which looked identical to the X-ray that I had, and they showed that it was magnetized and said there were some radio waves or something coming out of that.
Wow.
I don't know much about, but that's what they said. And I said, isn't this odd how all of this came together? And I remembered my dream again. And I remembered how odd it was to meet the Hesses, or the Giffords, actually, when we were doing this. And then to have this piece of metal and watch this show, it's a lot of coincidences. So one of the fellows that wrote a review for The Unwelcome was a psychiatrist. It was Perry Calley, who was a PhD and medical doctor, who wrote An Extraordinary Journey into the Uncharted Depths of the Human Mind. So we became friendly, and I told him the story. And he does retrogressive hypnosis. So I said, would you retrogress me back to that dream? I want to see if it was real, if something like that or that exactly really happened, because it stuck with me so vividly. And so we're getting our signals straight, but hopefully over the next month and a half or so, I'll head out to Tampa, Florida, where he has his office. We'll set up some video cameras, and he'll retrogress me back to that moment. But it's strange how things happen. And I just looked at this sort of history and said, it's like somebody tapping you on the shoulder.
Yeah.
Finally, you turn around and say, what? What do you want?
That's very interesting, man. It looks like that how the Hess family and you came in contact with them. It's like a synchronicity. Like all this stuff happened. It's like do you understand what I mean? It's like
I do.
It seems like this whole thing with your friend, you having lunch with your friend, meeting the Hess family, and doing that whole investigation.
Yeah.
On your, it was just like it had a connection to you.
As you know, and maybe your listeners, your audience doesn't, but I took them to the National Center of Psychiatry in Washington, D.C., and had them tested for neurosis or psychosis, or whether they were prone to fantasies, and absolutely, passed with flying colors. They took a lie detector test, passed with flying colors. And then I took them to the Mountain Center of Psychiatry in Asheville, and they were retrogressed by Dr. William Annixter, who worked a lot with the FBI, with witnesses that had fuzzy memories about crime or maybe a terrorist attack or something along those lines. So they were brought through the full spectrum, like an investigative reporter would do, or like a detective would do.
Interesting. Wow.
But Mark, even with The Unwelcomed, think about what a coincidence this was. This happened, by the way, 50 years ago.
Right.
I met Blighty. Blighty gave me this story 50 years ago. I tried to write it then, but I wasn't a good enough writer. I just couldn't capture the turn of the century. I could do contemporary writing about something that's happening today, but I really struggled with dealing with Sigmund Freud, his characters, William James, his characters, very, very difficult to write. And then finally, 2 years ago, I said, this is too good a story. I'm going to try again. And so that's where The Unwelcome came from. But what a series of coincidences that is as well, I've been very fortunate.
Absolutely. I think this is a good moment to pause for a brief break. But when we come back, Ron, I'd like to talk about the actual incident, of what happened to the Hess family. Yeah. And I want to one more time. I cannot recommend this book enough. This is the Mojave Incident, written by our guest Ron Felber, and it is absolutely one of the most stunning and hair-raising books on UFO and parapsychological phenomenon that I have ever read. It's available on Amazon for $15 or $16 or something like that. It's really inexpensive.
Hmm.
And I recommend this to everybody. But you're watching What Lies Beyond the podcast, and with our guest Ron Felber, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you.
All right, take 5.
Okay.
Sweet.
So do I turn this down, Mark, or just leave it the way it is, or
Yeah, you can leave it the way it is, or you can just unstage yourself. Either way,
I'll leave it the way it is. That's fine.
copy. All right, so we'll be back.
Okay.
Okey-doke.
All right. While we're waiting, I want to give a shout out to my buddy Caleb. He just left a comment. And Caleb, I want to welcome you to our community, and glad to have you. Thank you for tuning in, and looking forward to hearing your feedback at work. He works with me, and
Nice.
and then we got Moto Kitty here. Say hi, Moto.
Moto.
This is Moto de Moto. He's my little buddy. He's my pal. He keeps me company overnight when I'm awake all night, and he's a good kitty, real good kitty. But I'm looking forward to hearing the way Ron tells the story of the Mojave incident.
Mhm.
Is so good. He does a great job telling the story. It's very compelling. And I know you did. What were your thoughts on it?
I liked it. I actually liked it a lot, and I've read other books that detail the stories of other people's stuff and their experiences, and a lot of the writing is very dry. Like it's in your face about this is this, and it's just told really without any emotion behind it. It's kind of
Yeah.
like reading stereo instructions.
Yeah,
If
it's
that makes sense.
kind of dry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I like the how the narrative itself, kind of put you in the viewer's seat. It's very easy to slide into the characters' minds and the moments of what's going on with them.
Greg's read the book. He read the book. I loaned him a copy of the book. Gosh, how long ago was it, Greg? It was years ago, right?
Yeah, long time.
Oh, I know you seem to enjoy it. All right.
And
So,
I know exactly how they were feeling too when they were getting the visions of seeing their kid on the table, being vivisected and whatnot,
yeah,
and that fear of being a parent and knowing that your child is in danger, man. Yeah, that got me. That got
Yeah.
me like right here, man. I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah. That's one of my most.
They thought they were in hell.
Hmm.
They
Yeah.
thought they had
Yeah.
died and were in hell. Isn't that? I mean, that says it all. I think, you know.
And
Well,
making them relive every moment with every vivid detail, and you know, just feeling everything in their memory all over again, and
Yeah.
just having that
Yeah.
nightmare wash over you once more was just
What I found most fascinating about all of it was the answers that were given to the psychiatrists about the aliens themselves,
mhm.
where they come from, why they're here.
Oh yeah, that blew my mind.
I
That
mean,
absolutely blew my mind.
because you never get that. Like everybody says, like, well, why are they here? What are they doing? What do they care? But you know, if they're here, when are we going to see them? All those questions are answered, and in really direct terms. And that's so mind blowing. And I believe that. I believe that in my kid's lifetime, there will be a major connection, a major communion between civilizations.
Mhm.
I believe that.
I guess we'll find
Well,
out.
I don't know if I'll be here, but I know my kids will.
there were some documents that apparently came out a couple of years ago that were given to a filmmaker. His name is Chad Kalick. He's done like a bunch of documentaries about hauntings and things like that affected his family. That were, like his mother went through a possession episode where he had to have her exorcised, and then he did a documentary called Sir No Face, and it was dealing with a paranormal society that was being paid by the Australian government to investigate Cockatoo Island, which is like the prison island in the middle of like the Sydney Bay or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the first ones in history to have pure 100% live, unrefutable footage of a full body apparition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as they go to investigate the apparition, trying to, disprove it, debunk it, and everything like that, immediately the government started telling them that they needed to shut up about it, stop talking about it, that we're not going to pay you for the work you've done and everything like that, because people that were being given the information about this entity started relaying that it doesn't exactly look like a child or anything that you think it is, but the shape and its movements matches what people are saying is an extraterrestrial gray.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as soon as they did that, the government started putting the kibosh on them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then he received documents later in the second part of it called No Face the Gray was the name of the second documentary. And he received a bunch of documents that were also given to like Dr. Stephen Greer, Richard Nolan, not Stanton Friedman, Michael Sala, and a couple of other guys that are real big.
That's interesting.
And the documents were stating that in 2017, when they were beginning to unveil all the Tic Tac videos and the gimbal and the Go Fast, stuff like that, that apparently a lot of world leaders were brought in for a summit dealing with what was labeled to be an extraterrestrial senate or organization that was basically telling the world leaders that you have 10 years to begin telling society and preparing them for our arrival. And if you don't, well, we're going to reveal ourselves anyway, and you can deal with the chaos and the fallout that's going to occur from it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So now we're getting all these spearheaded movements with Congress going with the oversight committees, getting the interviews and testimony, and new videos are coming out more and more every day.
Yes.
the office with NASA and Arrow and stuff like that. So all that stuff started when these events apparently happened. And now we're gearing toward 2027, which is the 10-year mark.
Mm-hmm.
And now other documents are coming out saying that there's going to be an event occurring this year that will begin the stage of showing irrefutable proof of we not being alone. Now they're saying they're finding techno signatures on Enceladus. They're finding some other things that show possible oxygen, some type of materials or elements or whatever that show that existing life is existing on planets within our galaxy right now. Like Enceladus is a moon of Saturn. And they're saying they're finding techno signatures on that planet or on that moon, but it's
very
it's
interesting.
an ice moon, basically. So, and they're looking at TRAPPIST and things like that in another galaxy. I think it's like 8 to 12 light years from us or something. It's very, very close. And the James Webb Telescope is showing that there's something on TRAPPIST is producing artificial light on the dark side of the planet and all this other stuff. So yeah, you're right. There probably is something coming. And as for what it is, we don't know yet. But now people are seeing weird creatures in Miami and everything else. So,
but it's been an escalation. This is my own view. I think, and by the way, this comes from the dialogue in the Mojave Incident with Elise Gifford, and she talks about being desensitized. But if you think about it, and this is my theory, this started out, let's say, in Mount Rainier, when this pilot took pictures of something, 9 objects, so fuzzy pictures, and all the pictures then were fuzzy. It was, and you're in Omaha, Nebraska, and a truck driver pulls over and takes a photo, but they're always grainy and not very good. Then you had in the 60s the Betty and Barney Hill incident. So you have a credible guy, a credible woman, and they have this fantastic story. But why would they lie? I mean, the guy works for the postal department, and why would he lie? He's not making money on this. It probably takes a lot of heat from everybody.
Turn their life into a nightmare.
Turn their life into a nightmare.
Not only
then you get the alien abductions beyond that, with communion with Whitley Strieber, etc. Then you get the Navy videos that are, and now you have the congressional hearings. If you had done this, if these Navy videos had come out in the 1950s, the world would be quaking.
Yeah.
But what amazed me was you have in real and true evidence of extraterrestrial craft. I mean, undeniable. These are Top Gun pilots, etc. You have Fife Symington from Arizona, the governor. You have presidents now that have said they've seen these things, and nobody blinks. You have a guy that says there's a recovery team, Grush, that for years we've been recovering alien bodies and spacecraft, etc., and swears to it, high level until under oath before Congress. It's nobody blinks. But if that guy had done that 20 years ago, the world would be shaking. The world would have exploded with fear and emotion. But there's no emotion, and the reason there's no emotion is because we've been desensitized over the last 50 years or so. And at the end, this really is just paving the way for a major encounter between extraterrestrials and humans. I mean, it's very clear to me that the stage is set. This is not an accident. These events escalate point by point like turning the heat up in water. If you put your hand in water and it starts cold and goes up only a few degrees at a time, you'll have your hand in boiling water and won't know it.
Yeah. Well, I think we can safely say that we have returned with our special guest Ron Felber, and I want to thank you again for being with us,
Oh,
Ron.
my pleasure.
And I appreciate you being here as well. Um, with all that being said, Ron, take us back to, if you will, take us back to the Gifford or the Hess family,
Yeah.
and they're wanting to go on a weekend outing or something, and tell it. Let's start from there. Let's start at that point.
Sure, sure. So basically, you have a mother with two young kids. And maybe, I don't know if you have children or not, but if you did or do, you
Yeah,
know that mothers with young children need to get out at some point in time and say, I
sure,
want to be with adults, you know? So that's pretty
absolutely.
much what happened. So here's a guy that was working as a project manager for major construction sites, a lot of stress. His wife has these young kids and winds up being pregnant again very shortly after this. And so, I want to get away. I want to, go out to a dinner. I want to listen to some music. I want to dance and feel like I'm not a mother anymore, but like we're dating or something, you know?
Right.
So the husband says, well, I don't get that much time off. And I want to go hunting. There was a mule deer that I missed with my brother and father. They've given me a relentless time for missing the shot. And I want to go back and get the mule deer. So they try to figure out how do we reconcile these things. And what they decide to do is to take a trip, have the parents-in-law watch the kids. They'll go to Whiskey Pete's, which is a place just outside the Mojave Desert, and they have dancing and pretty good food and whatnot. They'll stay then at the Mid Hills campsite, which is just before the entering into the Mojave, and then he'll go into the Mojave with her, and they'll camp out and whatnot, and he'll do his hunting. So that was the idea. Basically, they do the Whiskey Pete's thing. They get to Mid Hills, and the campsite is sold out, which is very unusual. Again, these coincidences that we talk about is very unusual. So he says, well, we've got this camper. Let's go into the desert, and we'll camp out there. We'll stay in the camper. We have sleeping bags, etc. So reluctantly, Dawn Hess, and we'll use their real names, Dawn Hess, says, okay, but reluctantly. And in the back of her mind, I guess she had read about drug deals that go down in the Mojave and, motorcycle gangs and bodies and things that, that bad stuff happens in the desert because no one's there. And it's where outlaws and whatnot do their business. So she's a little reluctant for that, but she decides to go. They go, and they have their campfire. They're roasting marshmallows now. They've had a couple steaks. Campers there. Steve looks over his shoulder, and a UFO sort of peeks out from behind the mountains, which isn't very far from him to his right side. But it goes back in again. He had had a UFO experience when he was 12. And it stuck in his mind, a little bit like the dream I told you about. It stuck in his mind big time. He had been camping with his parents and another family, and he and his friend were fishing at the age of 12 in a lake, and they saw this UFO, and they felt like they were chased by the UFO. They dropped their fishing rods, they ran. They go to their parents' campsite. Of course, the parent, probably having some beer and a good time. And so they see these kids that say they just saw a flying saucer, and they say, oh, yeah, that's great. When you go fishing again,
Yeah.
So they sort of blow him off. But to him, it was a major experience in his life. And that experience and the fear that he felt all comes tumbling down into his brain when he sees this UFO behind the mountain. He doesn't want to tell Dawn because she's already nervous. And the last thing he needs to do is say, "Oh, by the way, I just saw a flying saucer behind the mountain here." So he doesn't say anything. But later on, they're looking at stars. And so, the different configurations. And in the desert, two things. It's very noisy, which doesn't sound right, but it is. And it's very clear. So, not like, I don't know where you are, if you're in Nashville or if you're in LA or if you're in Miami or wherever you might be, you're not going to see the stars like you'd see them in the Mojave Desert. It's clear as a bell.
Right.
So they're naming different constellations, this, that, and the other. And he goes, and that's a double star. You could see it's brighter and it's bigger and whatnot. And she goes, if that's a double star, this must be a triple star. And there's this bright light that's orb that's in the sky. So Steve doesn't really know what to say about that. But then they look over the mountain, which is maybe in front of them now. And it's Tabletop Mountain, it's called. And above the mountain are 9 glowing objects in the configuration of an M. So if you
Wow.
just picture that. And now they're sort of dumbstruck and frightened, intrigued and frightened, but no penetrating fear of the way what's to come. Then they start blinking to one another like they're communicating, the 9 lights. And Dawn, of course, is petrified. She was petrified to begin with. She never wanted to be there. And she goes, what's going on? He goes, I think maybe it's a military exercise. There's a lot of bases around there. And maybe it's a military exercise. He goes, all right, I guess. Now they see hundreds of shining lights. And they start dropping to the ground. And now it's not hypothetical anymore. Now it's like real fear. And so Steve, who's a hunter and prepared to hunt, I guess has a Remington shotgun and I think a Browning rifle. So he's going to go to the camper and get the guns. They think that maybe the Russians are invading the country.
Right.
Or
This is
maybe
during Cold War.
because this was so massive. Maybe the Chinese, whatever, but something horrible is going on here and something incredibly threatening. And so Steve goes to do that. And then they both get this telepathic message, don't try to shoot us. Don't try to harm us, or we'll kill you.
Wow.
Get in the back of the camper. And so Dawn goes to Steve, you hear that, don't you? You hear what they're saying. And reluctantly, he goes. And they sit in the back of this camper, and I try to imagine there are windows here. There's a back window. There are curtains on the windows to the side. And they sit in that camper, Steve with the shotgun on his lap. Then they see two and I should tell you, just before they get in the camper, they see hundreds of shining red eyes, glowing eyes, rushing towards them. And this is when they're just horrified.
That's creepy.
You go in the camper, and they're sort of trapped there because there are 2 like monitors that are in front of the lip of the camper, so that if Steve were to go forward, it would go forward. And they're electrified.
Do they describe what these beings look like?
I don't know that they were these were particularly beings. These were more like electric monitors.
Oh, okay.
Like a fire plug, a fire plug, that kind of size, and basically not a being, but a means to keep them in the camper.
Right. I
So
understand.
if he went forward too far, he'd get electrocuted. So he'd get a tremendous shock. So obviously they're trapped. I think that was the point.
Yeah.
Then these beings, these dwarfish type figures, they describe them as like dwarves or gremlins. They shiny red eyes. They have like leathery faces, They're not large. They're like monkeys or something like that. Gremlins, they describe them as. And they're all over the camper. Literally, they're on the camper. They're in the trees. And there's a tremendous frenzy. But they have this, and this is where maybe a religious interpretation comes in somehow, but they feel like they're malevolent, that they're evil, that these beings are evil. So at that point, they see a huge probe come down, and it's panning the desert floor, and above them is a UFO the size of a battleship, an aircraft carrier.
Wow, that's big.
Blocks out, it caps the entire valley. That's how huge it is. And what's interesting to me is Fife Symington, in describing the UFO from the Phoenix Light, that's exactly what he says. They say it was the size of a football field or the size of an aircraft carrier. And it caps the valley. Now there's no sound, no animals, no nothing, just dead silence, which is really creepy.
Yeah.
And this probe starts going around, and then they have what they call the searcher, this sort of triangular device that's combing the desert floor, like looking for something, like searching, like maybe a mining operation or something. So it's searching. This probe is down upon them. And that's when the second type of being, they call them the illuminated figures. These would be beings that are maybe 5 feet, 4 or 5 feet in height. They are illuminated, and they have the spindly limbs, like a child, like maybe a 4-year-old child, but taller, large eyes, and illuminated. 9 of them surround the camper, and they looked at these beings, again, I guess by intuition, like scientists. They're studying them. And this is when the mental telepathy starts happening, where they start getting flashed back to different moments in their lives with these beings just staring at them. So, of course, they pull the curtains, but the curtains do no good because, these things are just so brilliant. In the meantime, this mining operation, the searcher is going around the desert, and they feel this rumbling under the ground and smell like sulfur.
That's very common, by the way.
Smell of sulfur is that when people talk about demons, frequently they talk about the smell of sulfur, going back to whenever, but that happens too in our Clara Fowler case. She talks about this dense odor. They talk about it like sulfur or like a rotten egg smell. Mm-hmm. And they think that it's part of the mining operation. They feel the ground underneath rumbling. And this beam is shooting things up into the large UFO, into the craft, like samples of plants, animals, insects, just like a vacuum cleaner sucking.
Right.
In the meantime, they're put through this battery of horrific transportations back to a time when, and I don't like to get into this too much, where Dawn was assaulted. Leave it at that.
Yeah.
Where Steve, who's a hunter, feels like he's being hunted and tracked down and shot and eviscerated. Just horrible, terrifying things about their children, where their children are in jeopardy, and their children are, their lives are in more than in danger, and just terrifying to them. They think they're in hell. They're pinching each other. What do you see? Is this real? Tell me exactly what you see. And they describe it to one another. They think they're in hell. They think that they're dead and in hell. They are breathing so heavy that they think they're going to have heart attacks. But when they feel like their chest is going to burst open, a kind of mist comes in the camper that calms them down like a sort of sedative. And the idea is this: these beings want to keep them alive so they can continue their experiments. They don't want them to die. And then there's more but I don't want to get into too much detail on that, except to say that just when it seems like they can't take any more, things start to recede, and this other being, and again, sort of a religious connotation, but an angelic presence. They said clearly feminine. They called it their comforter. In the sky, they see this being, this angelic presence, just like you'd think about an angel, and they hear this telepathic message: "It's going to be all right. You'll survive this. Your children will not be harmed. Just have faith, and you'll be all right." Right about that time, they go to sleep. They pass out.
It's very interesting, by the way.
Yeah, I think so too. They pass out, and that's really where things end until the next morning. They wake up. The campfire is out, and they're on the ground asleep or passed out, whatever you want to say. But they had the definite feeling that they had been brought on the craft, but don't remember it. When they get home, they have horrible nightmares. And in the nightmares, they remember being experimented on. They remember seeing these eyes. They go into their son's room, and he's spinning like a top, screaming. And
I want to stop you right there for just a second, if you
Sure.
don't mind, Mr. Felber.
Not at all.
So this is very interesting to me, and I'll open this up for discussion if either one of you guys want to jump in here for a moment. But I know from my personal experiences, I have experienced various type of parapsychological phenomenon, such as like telekinesis or psychokinesis, clairvoyant type dreams, and things that are doors slamming shut by themselves, as a sort of what Dr. Barry Taft calls a paranormal fallout afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I find that very interesting. That's and more common than people would realize.
Yes. Yeah. So they have these nightmares, and their child is spinning like a top. They come in the room, and they grab him, and I said, everything's going to be all right. She goes, no, there are monsters. She goes, oh, there are no monsters. He goes, no, there are monsters. They're little, and they have red eyes. And of course, these are the gremlins that they had dealt with. And even at the point where, she gets pregnant, but again, they're sort of sexually dysfunctional.
Right.
They're, as I mentioned, but they have this compulsion to make love. They feel like the bed is surrounded by these beings, and Steve goes to her, "You're pregnant," and she goes, she goes to Steve, "I'm pregnant," and he goes, "Well, you're not pregnant. You're not in the cycle and whatnot." And she goes, "No, I know I'm not supposed to, but I am," and she is pregnant. But imagine having these things surround your bed.
That's just terrifying.
Yeah. So then I met them around that time. So I met them, sort of in the aftermath, but the aftermath is spooky as what happened to them.
Right. I agree with that.
And so then I told you I brought them to the National Center of Psychiatry. I had them take a lie detector test. I had them evaluated. Then I brought them to be retrogressed, and really that I think the transcripts, which all that comes from transcripts, right off the tapes, the dialogue, not invented. That's right, word for word. That's what happened. I think it's the most stunning testimony to why there are alien abductions, why aliens have an interest in human beings, why they're here, and when they'll make contact. I mean, in very direct terms, even to the point where the doctor and myself felt like it wasn't Dawn Hess talking. It was someone talking, channeling through her. So that's the deal.
Wow. I have to plug my headphones in. Excuse me for a moment.
Sure, of course.
I want to open this up for discussion. Mike, you want to take this?
I don't really have anything else to say other than what I've already said. I mean, as an experience, I'm what they consider to call nowadays an experiencer myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've had 6 events over the course of my life, and I'm 43 years old now. I know what it's like to have that fear, but not on the level of what happened with them. The disorientation of, being in a new place around new things that you've never seen before, where your brain has to reach to piece together what you're looking at. But the majority, if not all of my experiences were generally pretty positive, minus 2 that I really have no idea of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But
Michael, were you ever retrogressed?
No, I have not been. I had my psychiatrist when I was a kid wanted to attempt to do that, but my mother was all, no, I don't need to hear any more of this nonsense. And so she had me put in a mental institution for a year or so. So, yeah, but I've had people that have offered to do it. I'm kind of fuzzy about it myself because it's one of those things that I know I've experienced it, and I don't know if, barring some things, especially the 2 events that I don't recall anything other than the event of being taken. I don't know if I can I believe there's probably a very good reason as to why I don't remember it.
I get you.
And I don't know if I can mentally handle being confronted with what could be, utterly shattering to my mind.
Yeah. No, I get it.
So, yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about it. I've had several instances of missing time that I can recall. I'll give you an example, Ron. I'm from Mississippi, and my grandparents are from the southern part of the state. And during the summers, they would come. Sometimes they'd come visit us for the weekend, and I might, sometimes I'll go home with them for a week or 2, and and spend some time with them. I've had experiences at their house. I've had experiences like this at their house, but one of the most profound experiences I had as a kid. One time we were on our way home to their house, and it was like a little after 9:30 or something like that. I think it was sometime around that point. And we were near the town of Meridian. And I remember that because there was an exit. I remember seeing the exit sign for Philadelphia on this highway, which is a big, like a casino town in South Mississippi. And right after that, some really bright object just flew right in front of the vehicle. And the next thing we knew, we were getting home really late, sometime around, it was close to midnight. And we were, at that point, we're only like an hour away, or less than an hour away from their house in Laurel, Mississippi. And I remember after when the next when I guess we could say I wasn't that I was conscious or whatever. My grandfather was driving. He wasn't saying anything. My grandmother seemed very bewildered and worried. And I remember her saying something, what was that? Or something like that. But I was sick. I was sick as a dog. I was so nauseous. I remember the rest of that night, my grandmother had to tend to me. I was very sick. Um, but that was one instance of missing time I had. And another one, when I was a little younger than that, I was a couple years, 2 or 3 years younger. I was sleeping in their basement. I mean, my whole family was there at the time, and there was a room in their basement. And I woke up, and there was three entities standing at the foot of my bed. That's the first time I've actually seen something, a non-human entity. They were really short, maybe just barely above the front bed rail. They had hoods on, like a druid cloak type thing. They had the big black eyes and everything, and they were very short, and they were sending me ideas in my mind. Like it wasn't a spoken language or anything, but it was very telepathic. It was like simple ideas in my mind that they were projecting into me, like come with me, and I was scared to death. So, but anyway, I've had experiences like that myself, definitely.
Yeah.
And there's more too. Also, I haven't really spoken about a lot. But anyway, Greg, you got anything for us right now, brother?
Oh, my thought was why these extraterrestrials were just hitting these two with a barrage of memories. I mean, what do you think the whole point of that was?
Yeah.
Good question.
I think that Dawn explains that. It's a good question, and it's a question that was asked by the doctor, and the answer is they don't have emotions like human beings. They don't understand emotions, and so this battery of tests were to bring them to exceptional points in their life where they experience terror, disgust, hope, uh, jubilation, joy, depression. And so it was a battery of tests to what triggers these emotions. What do these emotions mean? How does the human brain, the human soul respond to certain things? What makes people afraid? What makes them disgusted? What makes them envious? What makes them? And so these experiences they were brought back to were not random. They were meant to create an emotion that these beings could study. And the reason, at least that Dawn says, was so that when this encounter does happen, this massive encounter between civilizations, they'll know how humans will react. And I think what they don't want is panic.
Okay.
Let's hope that's the case, at least.
Yeah, let's hope that's the case.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole other way you could look at this, right?
Yeah.
Manipulation.
My thing about good question, Greg. Thank you for that. My whole thing about this is, at the end of the day, we really don't know what these things are. We really don't know. I did a poll on our Project Stargate Paranormal Research Society page of what different hypotheses is what these beings are, and everything from angelic or fallen angelic beings to interdimensional beings that we have no idea, don't even begin to understand. The ET hypothesis, and like an ultra terrestrial type hypothesis. It's ongoing right now, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what that is. I personally kind of lean towards the interdimensional hypothesis, because that kind of covers the angelic also.
Yes.
I believe that these beings have demonstrated paranormal abilities that just defy logic.
For sure.
And people after the fact, they have psychic experiences themselves. Some of which has never had psychic experiences. They even have out of body experiences in some of these situations. But at any rate, when is your? Let me ask you this: when is your new book? Is it coming out in May or June or?
Well, the good news is that it'll be there's a pre-publication period where you can order it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any of the major outlets, and that will be in March.
Oh boy!
March. And then the official launch will be May 1st.
Is there any way can we order it from you also? Is there a way to order it from you or? Because
I think the best way is probably just Amazon, and they'll have it. It'll say pre-publication for sale, pre-publication, and then when it actually is printed and ready to go, the copies will come out. You know what I wanted to do, Mark, if you don't mind? I have a very short chapter from The Unwelcome. Would you mind if I read it? Would that be?
That would be incredible. Well,
Right.
You got let's do it.
All right. So this takes place in 1901, September 9th, 1901, at Danvers State Lunatic Asylum. This was in Massachusetts. So there was something bone-chilling, and I should set this up. So remember I mentioned to you about the marshal, the detective, Bassett?
Yes.
So Bassett is confronting the father, who he believes has strangled these two babies, his own kids, for a demonic, for a satanic ritual, as part of a satanic ritual. So he is in a lunatic asylum, and the marshal is meeting with him in the lunatic asylum. So there was something bone chilling about Danvers Asylum. Bassett was thinking as he approached the Kirkland Bridge. Its Gothic spires reached out into the arborescent gloom like something enormous and deformed. The gargoyles perched atop it grinned at the forest pressing on it. Fog curled up from rotted leaves like departed souls. But it was what was rumored to go on inside that caused the marshal's flesh to crawl. Originally designed for 400 patients, Danvers housed 3 times that many, with reports of sexual abuse, naked patients wandering the corridors covered with their own filth, and experimental surgeries like tapetectomy, where an ice pick was inserted above the patient's eyeball into the frontal lobe of the brain, ablating parts of the parietal cortex to keep inmates under control once ensconced behind its stone walls. The marshal passed through the main lobby into the open ward, then into the outermost disturbed wing, reserved for the most hostile patients. Behind the desk, the charge desk, a squat, short-haired man with a weightlifter's physique waited. Conway's the name, he greeted, firm and straightforward. Some call me Joe, but most call me Champ, he explained, turning to a portrait hung crooked on the plaster wall. And yes, that is a photochrome of the great John L. Sullivan. Do you follow the sport, sir? Some. Then perhaps you recognize this ruggedly handsome countenance with cauliflower ear and flattened proboscis. A classic Roman nose, sir. Roman all over my face, I tell him. You're a pugilist. Was, sir. Rank number 5 in the country till John L. put his mitts to me. He extended an open palm. Identification, please. The marshal handed him his badge and credentials. Conway glanced at the .32 caliber Colt holstered inside his long coat. I'll take that revolver, sir. Bassett shook his head. No thanks. I think I'll keep it. They told me a marshal from Fall River would stop by today. You're here to see Fowler, John, cell 13. He nodded. Will you be wanting me present during your visit? Unnecessary. I can handle Fowler. Better you than me. He handed the badge and ID back. When Bassett met his gaze, his eyes held an uneasiness that hinted at something like fear. The marshal had seen it throughout the staff. A creeping silence, like some unspoken terror, had descended on the hospital. He looked down the corridor. Figures dressed in white moved like phantoms on a ghost ship. His eyes narrowed. Why did you say that? Does Fowler frighten you? Conway thought for a moment, then jutted his chest out in something resembling a boxer's stance. In the ring, I can see what I got in front of me. Big, small, tough, sissified. In there, he said, gesturing towards the corridor. In that world, I don't know what the fuck goes on in his mind, and that scares the bejesus out of me. He picked up the keys from the desk and walked. Bassett followed him and was soon unlocking cell 13. The marshal looked up at the corridor ceiling. As he watched, a light bulb went dim, then flicked out completely. Go on in. Bassett said nothing, just stared at him. Want it locked behind you? No. Conway held his gaze for a moment, then left. A cold, shadowy feeling washed over Bassett as he watched his squat frame disappear into the darkness. He stepped into the cell. His body threw off an enormous shiver as the door slammed behind him. Eyes wide and alert, he searched the small padded cell, a commode, a sink, a canvas cot where Fowler sat, hollow-eyed, stroking the curly black hair of a ventriloquist doll sitting on his lap. Bassett, he said in a toneless voice, nothing like his own. I've been waiting. Prominent in the background, the marshal could hear the steady drip of water into the basin. Plop, plop. For me? He nodded with certainty. The lights flickered. Bassett's stare did not waver. Then you know why I'm here. Again he nodded, still stroking the doll's head. Then he stopped and put his ear to the doll's lips. Isabel says she knows how you found us. It was the Pinkerton. The marshal approached the cot where Fowler sat, smiling. How could he know that it was Frank Goyer who directed him to the asylum? Yes, he said. How did you know? Plop. Silence. Another plop. Bassett's tongue became thick. He was sweating. Though Fowler had shriveled to no more than 120 pounds, he sensed he was facing something monumentally powerful. The evil one told me, he answered, eyes gleaming with intelligence. He said you'd appreciate it. It? The display of prescience. Isn't life theater after all? Players on a stage and all that? He giggled into his palm. He doesn't like you. You should know that. Call it a warning. I didn't come here to play games, John. You are John Fowler, wife beater, murderer, member of the Fall River cult. The contour of his expression, drawn and shallow, suddenly brightened. Bottom fact is, those two, Charlie and Bess, was the pulse of my heart, he exclaimed in Fowler's Irish brogue. Banshees and hams, bollocks, all of it, he mimicked. He's off his chump, I tell you. He shook his head, laughing. What a fool art, John Fowler, he declared, voice returning to that of the stranger. Bassett stared into his eyes like the claws of an eagle, impossible to escape. If you're not John Fowler, who are you? The master's a traveler. He loves to travel, he prattled, stroking the doll's head excitedly. Says it's the gypsy in him. You killed them, didn't you? Charles and Bessie, your own flesh and blood, strangled the life out of those babies and used their bodies as an offering to Satan. Not nice, Marshal Hilliard, he chided, wagging a finger at him. Not nice at all. Then putting his ear to the doll's lips. Yes, that's right. No doubt about it, he affirmed. Isabella says you're judgmental, he advised, looking up to him. Says the master doesn't like you. She doesn't like you either. So you killed them. Not exactly, he temporized, turning the doll's head around to face him, watching Bassett's expression change from curiosity to horror at the sight of the doll's visage, eyes plucked from the sockets, cheeks slashed, nose, ears, mouth removed, face smeared with blood and feces. You see, our communication is rarely direct. Understand the evil one has a million things on his mind, disease and murder, imminent war, and the dawn of a new century, his century. And so he requires intermediates. A doll will do in a pinch, though he much prefer humans, takes delight in bringing down the holy ones, a nice girl, a saintly girl, like our Clara. But I'm not the object of his affection. Few are. So I communicate through Isabella, and trust me, it works. You're here, Marshal Hilliard, are you not? Bassett felt the hair prickling up on his hands as he listened to the dripping. Yes, he conceded darkly, I'm here. But why did you come, he asked sprightly. To hear my confession? Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Forgiveness, mercy, those are the sins, Marshal Hilliard. It's chaos and blood we pray for. Humiliation to the righteous, desecration to the sacred. He sang out madly, then stopped, face writhing with distaste. But what would you know about that? I know what's right and wrong. Do you? I know what's sick and evil, he continued, and what is just. I'm here, John Fowler, or whoever the hell you are, to right the balance, to avenge the murders of Charles and Bessie. I'm here to send you and Holmes and the Ripper and all the others back to the molten pit you crawled out of. But I didn't do it, he said blithely, stroking the doll's head again. What? I did not kill them. Liar! You're a man of the law, a detective of sorts. You, above all, should know. I didn't kill them. Not those squalid little fucklets, and certainly not Forrest. How could I? It's your theory that whoever murdered Charles and Bessie also murdered Forrest. But I was here at Danvers, locked in a cage, bound up in a straitjacket. Check the logs. I could not have killed him, or skinned him, or watched him die, because I was here in cell 13. From the bottom of my heart, I tell you, I could not have murdered Forrest, and I did not strangle those babies, though, to be fair, I drank their blood with the others. And yes, I was the one who cut them to pieces after the life was wrung out of them, after they were dead.
Holy cow.
And who? Who killed them? In the small padded cell, his words sounded distant, otherworldly, as if someone else had spoken them. Come here, Marshal, Fowler promised with a nod and a wink, and I'll give you a clue. Bassett stared at him strangely. Time seemed to stretch out before him. A minute could have been an hour a day. He felt suspended between the seconds on a clock. Come on, lean in, Hilliard, he said, waving him forward, and I'll whisper it to you so no one else can hear. He took a step forward, listening to the dripping, plop, plop, like the pounding of a drum in a death march, egging him on until finally he put his ear to Fowler's lips. You know him, the one what did it, he rasped, and he knows you. It was a friend of yours who killed them babies. It was he who snuck into Forrest's room, put him out with a dose, and skinned him alive. Bassett's eyes grew wide. As he pulled back startled, Fowler slipped his hand into his long coat, snatching the Colt revolver from its holster. Then, with a high-pitched laugh that pierced the cell's gloaming silence, he held the gun up and took aim. The marshal gathered his strapping frame, furious and unafraid. Go ahead, shoot, you son of a bitch. And he did. Fowler put the gun to his temple and pulled the trigger. A miasma of blood and white brain tissue splattered the wall behind him.
Dang.
Damn.
Wow. That's intense, man. I can't wait to get my hands on this book. I'm going to be one of the first kids on my block to get this book. No doubt.
Yeah. Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
It's an incredible story. It's an incredible story. If you want to, and if you want to know the nature of evil, this story tells you the nature of evil.
So I believe it. I believe
Me too.
you.
Trust me, I do.
Yeah. Dang, man, that's intense, man. That's riveting and horrifying.
Well, we're hoping it's a movie, of course, right?
Oh,
It's
I'm
very
sure someone
visual.
will make a movie out of it.
It's very
I mean,
visual.
that's the goal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the goal. We shall see.
Sorta.
You never
Wow.
know. But I was so happy. I mean, I was so happy that again this story came my way, and I'll forever be grateful to Bill Blatty for passing it along.
Sure, absolutely. I completely understand, and I know you're a very good writer. I mean, you're an excellent writer. I haven't had a chance to check out any of your fictional stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to, as soon as I have time, to buckle down and read some nonfiction, because
But I think you have the manuscript for this, right?
yes, I do, and I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna read that as well, and I'm looking forward to. But I'm still going to buy a physical copy of your book. I want to support you.
I appreciate it, Mark.
And
Well,
I
Mark,
recommend.
maybe when we get a little closer to I don't know, April or May or whatever, when the book comes out, maybe we'll talk again.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back on. You're one of our most popular guests. We enjoy having you. You're a great speaker, and we're really blessed.
I enjoy the conversation too. It's really like sitting in your living room, right?
Yeah, exactly, man. This is the next best thing for sure.
Next best thing.
But Ron, we appreciate you being with us, and we'll be in touch, and look forward to having you back sometime. And I hope you and your loved ones have a blessed day, and take care.
Thank you, Mark.
It's
Greg,
been an
thank
honor to
you.
meet you,
Michael,
sir.
thanks so
Thank you.
It's
much.
been an honor to meet you.
Great fun.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right.
See
Take
you
care,
again
brother.
soon. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That was Ron Felber, author of the
Awesome.
Mojave Incident. What an amazing guest. I think that he was one of our most popular guests from Project Stargate Fringe Research. I remember that was, I've had a lot of people hit me up saying, Mark, that was great. You know, Mark, bring him back sometime. I was like, yeah. And then he just kind of hit me up like a month and a half ago and said, hey, I want to come back and talk to you guys again. So I really, he's definitely a great guy, and we enjoy having him. Let's take 5, and then when we come back, we're going to do. Michael's got some news bits. We're going to have a broad discussion about Miami, and you're listening to What Lies Beyond podcast, and we will be right back.
Yo.
Take 5. All right. We'll wait for Greg to get back. Man, that was awesome.
Yeah.
That was a good, one of the best interviews we've done in a while.
Hell yeah, man.
I might be going out on a little limb here, but I'm just going to tell you how I feel. I think Ron Felber gives some of these other authors like Stephen King a run for their money. I think he's that good.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had a chance to dive into his fictional stuff. He's got several novels that have made it to the either the big screen or the small screen in some way or another. But I'm looking forward to reading that whole manuscript and seeing and experiencing the whole story. The way he read that passage, he's just a really good storyteller. Whether it's a true story or if it's a fictionalized story, he's very, very good and a master of his own craft.
Oh yeah,
yeah. But here, as soon as Greg gets back, we will go ahead and start our news bit. Very much looking forward to that. Hang on just a moment. Someone sent me a message on Facebook. All right. I don't know who this person is. We will respond to that later. But anyway, excellent stuff, man.
Hell yeah.
What I really found interesting. Hey, welcome back, brother Greg. What's up, buddy?
Hola.
All right.
I'm back.
I'll save that comment for later. But I was really interested in his personal revelation and how that synchronicity. He came in around that time. He came in contact with his old friend, and he got wind of the story of Stephen Don Hess. But just to clarify, Stephen Don Hess is their real names. At the time when he wrote the book, he used pseudonyms, the Giffords, and I just want to clarify that. They and Ron himself all three of them were guests on Fade to Black with Jimmy Church years ago, and that interview was just freaking amazing. I think they were on twice, and then they had a spot on Paranormal Witness, and that's I want to show it to you guys at some point.
Okay.
I might even provide a link to it if there's a YouTube version of it. I'll provide a link to it on our group page so people can check it out. But at any rate, it's time for news. Let's do some news we'll let you kick it off. Let's talk about Miami. I don't know what to think about this. There's a lot of conflicting information, but I have an open mind on the subject, and we'll let you kick it off.
All right, so I know this is pretty much kind of blowing the internet up right now because the first initial day I learned about it, randomly through my Facebook feed, and the initial thing was apparently the police were being dispatched for an altercation between 50 people that were fighting with sticks and shooting off fireworks.
50.
Okay.
50?
50 like teenagers. And this was on New Year's Day. And all of a sudden, people started noticing that there's the scanner watchers and stuff like that started noticing that all of the scanners went radio silent. Right.
Interesting.
And the police presence went from what should have been, 5, 6 cop cars, maybe a paddy wagon, right?
Right.
Turned into 130 police cruisers, 7 paddy wagons or SWAT units, 6 Miami helicopters and another 7 black unmarked helicopters
I didn't hear about that.
converged.
I
Yeah.
never heard about the black unmarked.
Mhm.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
they converged on the mall that is in question. I can't the name of the mall escapes me at the moment. But they're responding there because apparently shots are being fired inside the mall. And people are reporting seeing 8 to 10 foot tall creatures or zombies. The number of creatures has varied amongst sources. Some were saying they saw 3 entities, some were saying they saw 15, some were saying they saw upwards of 20. The number is varying, but one of the most common number is 3. And people were firing at these entities. And they shut down the airport. Like no air traffic in and out other than the helicopters that were being, manned. The unmarked helicopters were the only things in the air. And they also shut down the power grid for the entire mall and 2 miles outside of the mall itself. So,
And they did have a power outage too, right? Wasn't there a power outage?
no, they literally killed the power.
Oh, okay, got you.
Yeah, like the power just didn't just go out, but the authorities killed the power apparently. And the eyewitnesses were stating that these entities were glitching, not like a computer, pixelation glitch or anything like that. Kind of like, imagine, like, you remember when the Predator was walking through water?
Vaguely.
And yeah, like when the Predator is walking through water after Dutch in the first movie and everything is kind of splotchy. He's invisible and then not invisible, and then you see pieces of him or whatever. And that the entities themselves were fading in and out of dimensionality, if that makes sense. And
Absolutely.
then, yeah, and then people were getting footage. Someone from one of the police helicopters got footage of something that was walking in front of a row of police cars, and around it were several orbs that they caught on that camera.
I heard about that part.
Mm-hmm. And 2, there are also people reporting that there was like a heavy flash of light and kind of the scent of an electrical discharge that occurred. And because there's a lot of people saying that they kind of stepped out, the air or everything around them was kind of wavy. So they think that they kind of stepped through a portal or something like that.
Now, hold that thought for a 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back before that for just a second. This is what I heard. Now, I heard a podcaster talking about this last night, and he said that someone allegedly brought some kind of device into the mall
Mm-hmm.
and activated it, and then it created like a bubble around it. Did you hear
Mm-hmm.
anything about that?
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, and then all hell breaks loose after that. Like literally, like it.
Okay.
I was just wondering if you heard about that.
No, I haven't heard that one.
Or Greg, have you heard it? Have you heard much about it as far as that goes?
No.
Okay.
And at that point, people had started looking, with portals and things like that. A lot of people have the I'm not exactly sure how a portal would work or whatever, but they reversed the coordinates for where that mall is. And the reverse of those coordinates plants the origination point, or a theoretical origination point, as smack dead in the middle of Antarctica, where the supposed hole is.
Wow.
That Admiral Byrd and others had talked about.
Wow. That is really
Oh, wow.
fascinating.
And I kind of took that because the video that I saw of that was, kind of a bouncy blonde haired girl with like a little pink sweater and everything. She's like, "Oh my God, you should check it out." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know." So I looked up those coordinates, and I had a couple of my friends look into it too. A buddy of mine, he's a member of the Galileo project with Avi Loeb. And
for those of us who aren't familiar with the Galileo project, could you explain that real quick?
The Galileo project is Avi Loeb's program where they're setting up satellites and things like that to get a more crystal clear view of the sky so that we can monitor things better in terms of objects and things like that are in the sky, as well as anything that may be entering our atmosphere and things like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
And he, checked the same coordinates and everything, and yeah, the reverse of those coordinates are smack dead in the middle of freaking Antarctica.
That is crazy.
You can throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of all of the, theories and whatnot about Antarctica. But yeah, that's what we're dealing with in Miami right now, apparently. So,
well, let me tell you what else I heard. So a lot of the cops that were and law enforcement professionals that were on the ground, boots on the ground there. Mm-hmm. They either won't comment on, are allowed to comment on it, or they're just completely denying it, saying that, laughing about it.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this guy who's supposed to be running for sheriff, or
his son got him on the phone.
Yeah,
and I'm not allowed to talk about it. Well,
That's
did they
intriguing.
tell you you're not allowed to talk about it? I don't know how else I'm supposed to cut it, son. I'm not allowed to talk about it.
Wow.
Find something else to occupy your time. I can't talk about it. And of course, the police are laughing about it and things like that. And yeah, that's what they're gonna do. Especially when you have, apparently there was something like 3,000 people in this mall.
Right.
And you have 3,000 eyewitnesses. How do you shut up 3,000 people?
You really can't. You don't. That's the answer. I value, there's like I said earlier, there's a lot of conflicting information about this incident, but I want to add something to this that I think y'all will find interesting. So on January, I think it was on the 6th or 5th of January. Actually, before that, let's go back to Miami. There was a UFO sighting around that same time that looked like a spherical object. That was white. A lot of people, from my understanding, there was like over 100 or more witnesses, and several people got it on the video. Mm-hmm. Now, let's fast forward to like the 5th or 6th of January. I can't remember exactly what day it was. My oldest stepdaughter, Haley, she was driving home from work. Mm-hmm. And she saw, as she was getting relatively close to her house, she sees this object above the wood line, this glowing sphere. And the way she described it was it was like it was kind of like how we see from the ground the moon.
Yeah.
It's bright, but it's not like overbearingly bright.
Hmm.
Um, she sees this spherical object, and then all of a sudden it goes poof and drops to the ground, and it disappears. And she was really. She said she was very puzzled. She was very
Hmm.
excited about it, and it seemed to blow her mind. I want to try to get her on here to let her talk about it.
Hmm.
If we can ever, um, she has a very tight schedule of being a mother and
Oh yeah.
work and whatnot, and she has to go to bed at a decent time. But at least maybe I can pre-record something and stream it live
Hmm.
here, for us to listen to. But I find it interesting the parallels. My daughter's sighting. Then you got the other UFO sighting in Florida,
Hmm.
somewhere around Miami, I believe.
Yeah.
And then you got this incident.
Hmm.
I wonder if there's some connection here.
Well, too, a lot of people are also kind of doing the whole, they're trying to misdirect things because they've released the first few pages of Epstein's flight list and stuff like that. Um, and at the same time, I understand what people are trying to say, that they're trying to divert attention from that or whatever. But enough people, I understand that there's a lot of people in the world that want to know about that, but it's been so long that the impact has kind of tapered off, I guess. And it's one of those things where people either are 100% gung-ho about get every one of these fucking pedophiles and string them up, whatever.
Hmm.
And then there's others that are like, yeah, okay, yeah, we know that there's a bunch of sick bastards
Yeah,
in government and celebrities,
I definitely believe it.
to the
Hmm.
point where one of them is apparently Stephen Hawking, and they've turned him into a meme, you know,
Hmm.
because apparently he liked to watch dwarves or children act like they were trying to write on a chalkboard or something, supposedly. I don't know.
Very strange.
But there was also a report that an object trailed Air Force One with Biden on the plane.
I didn't hear that one.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
There has been now documents that have come out from a Skunkworks whistleblower. They've not revealed his name yet, where he provided documents to basically the news source that started covering Grush when he came out with
Mhm.
Coulthard, News Nation or whatever. They were provided documentation from the Skunkworks, from a worker there, where currently right now in their main office they have 7 non-human craft, and they have another 5 at one of their secondary installations in Nevada. um, we're getting ready to start undergoing more hearings in Congress. Apparently tomorrow morning they're having another classified congressional hearing.
I heard the Senate Intelligence Committee is trying to stonewall
They are.
this stuff.
They are.
That's disappointing.
But the big one that is supposed to be coming is supposed to be one that will be public, which will be detailing the documentation and everything that Grush has, because apparently now they've given him back his clearances, is what I'm hearing.
That's interesting. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Interesting. Well, we're gonna have a lot to talk about here in the near future.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Which reminds me, I want to do in the future. I want to do some. We have something really big and breaking like this. I think we ought to do some. Even if we're not planning having a guest, I think we should jump on here for 30 minutes to an hour and talk about some that when we have major stuff like this happen. And
Mhm.
when that is released, I definitely want to get you guys on here and talk about it. Greg, did you have anything, any news bets for us, or anything you wanted to talk about?
As of now, no, not really.
Okay. Well, thanks, Michael, for getting us up to speed on that,
Yeah,
and
man.
I think we can call it a day here. I hope all of you are doing well and enjoying your new year. Please stay safe, and also take a moment during your day and just do something nice for somebody. Show somebody some love and compassion. And spread around. There's too much negativity in the world, but I encourage all of you to show your friend or your neighbor or the stranger at the grocery store, show them some kindness and love, and it'll come back. It'll come back on you. It'll be a blessing on you. But Greg and Michael, thank you both for being with me today. And
Thank you for having me again.
yeah, I'm glad to have you guys on board. And you're listening to the What Lies Beyond podcast, and this is your host Mark Brenner signing off.
Y'all have a good night. Peace.
Good night.
Later.